Well, hello everybody. This is Rob. Welcome to the midweek. Ankit is on vacation this week, so you get stuck with me. And I gotta say, I think this is going to be a pretty short and simple midweek because there's not a lot going on in the market. So let's do a quick little recap of what's been happening so far this week.
All trades and analysis in this video are intended for professional traders only. This content does not constitute financial advice and is for educational purposes. This video is being released after a short delay due to Compliance Department review. Maverick members receive this content immediately as part of their daily trading resources. If you're ready to level up, consider joining Maverick Currencies. Our traders trade firm capital and keep 70 to 80% of profits. You bring the skill, we provide the backing. Let's get into today's market recap and see how the pros are trading the currency markets.
All right, we've got equities remain bullish. We'll take a look at the S&P. So we've got a risk on move at the moment. The problem is we're not getting any risk on correlations that really help us out. A lot of times we take a look at equities, and that tells us what's going to be going on with crypto. It's going to tell us what's going on with Forex, and boy, the correlations are just not there at the moment. So it doesn't really mean anything to what we do. What really is the most telling is the dollar and the 10-year bond yields are just going nowhere. They're just going nowhere. So again, those are the correlations that usually push and pull currencies around and Forex, and crypto around, but boy, they're just not going anywhere. We did get a pretty big report yesterday out of Australia. Australian inflation soared past expectations. It's supposed to come in at 2.8%. Sorry, it's supposed to come out at 1.9%. It came in at 2.8, which is a really big beat. And you would think, the Aussie would take off on that news with a risk-on backdrop, and it just didn't. Now, it did okay, but it just didn't take off. Other than that, we had some U.S. durable goods orders that were better than expected. Consumer confidence better than expected. We got retail sales out of the New Zealand that was better than expected. But here we are in this late August period, and there's just not anything going on. There's just no volatility. And I talked about this last weekend, is that we typically get this kind of price action in late August, and then after Labor Day, it gets better. It almost always gets better after Labor Day. Now, we do have some news coming out in about 3 hours here. NVIDIA earnings are going to be coming out, and that should move equities. Now, if that moves anything else, we'll have to wait and see, but it definitely will move equities. And you can see here for the week, very mild gains, mild losses internationally. This VT is down mostly because China's down about 2 or 3% overnight. I didn't read any news about it. Crypto sold off all weekend pretty hard. And again, we have seen an SPX crypto correlation that is also broken down as well. So there's just not a lot to go off of. Here's the S&P. You can see the S&P is just ready to break out to new all-time highs. It's just waiting for it. And like I said, NVIDIA earnings tonight, I think we're going to get a big candle. Look, I have no idea what's going to happen, but with all the other companies, what they've announced and all the push with AI and all the spending that's going on, I can't imagine NVIDIA's earnings are going to be bad. Now, what could happen is the stock could go down, even though their earnings are great. That could absolutely happen, but all the spending that's going on, I just don't see why we don't break out to the upside. And if we do sell off, I think that sell-off is bought pretty quickly to where I think we stay in this high base here. I think that's what we see. We just stay in the high base and then we break out higher going forward. Here's the weekly performance. The best trade would have been Euro Aussie short. I talked about that yesterday as really the only trade out there that's working is Euro Aussie short. The problem is the daily chart says don't take the trade. It's only the 1 hour and 4 hour charts that we're saying take the trade. I always like all of my timeframes to be in alignment. So I said, this is the only trade out there at the moment. And I'm not going to take it because it doesn't fit all of my rules. And we'll take a look at Forex, but look at these numbers. These numbers are just not great numbers at the middle of the week. The dollar hasn't moved any, pound hasn't moved any. I mean, just again, there's not a whole lot going on. Crypto had a big sell-off over the weekend. Again, no idea why. There was no news out there. Question is it ready for a bounce here? We'll take a look at that as well. All right, so here's the 10-year. 10-year just sitting there, 4.25. We're now in an even tighter range between 4.2 and like 4.35. And there's just not a lot going on. Here's the crypto chart. You can see it had this big pullback here, had a one-day rally, and then gave it all back up. But we're back down to support levels. And we did bounce off the 50-day moving average, which is a good thing. But you can see the bounce is anemic. I mean, we're not getting a whole lot of surge. This was a much more convincing bounce back here than this is here. But we'll just have to wait and see. Is there any news on the rest of the week? Yes, there is. I talked about this Friday core PCE index out of the US and NVIDIA earnings. So we got NVIDIA earnings tonight that should move equities. It should move equities, but the question is, does that move Forex? Does that move crypto? We'll have to wait and see. If it doesn't, then I think you have to wait till Friday for the core PCE price index, and we also have some GDP out of Canada as well. This is where we sat just yesterday. Let's go through things and take a look and see what's going on out there. As I said, I think this is going to be a pretty short session because there's just not a lot to talk about. So let's go through the cryptos, because I actually think that's, if there is a trade out there, I think cryptos are the trade. Bitcoin, here it is on the daily chart. You can see my rule is, and my rule has been very, very good to me over the years. I don't go long if the daily chart is below the 50-day moving average. And I don't go short if it's above the 50-day moving average. That rule has kept me safe for well over a decade. I think I made that rule back in like 2004. And it's just a hard and fast rule that I follow. So I cannot go long Bitcoin. It's not allowed. Now, of course, I could be an idiot and break my rules, but I broke my rules enough as a young trader to, to not break it anymore. We all have to do that kind of stuff. So Bitcoin is just a no trade for me. Bitcoin Cash, it's a possibility. It's at the 50-day moving average. But the question is that the best crypto? Let's take a look and see Ethereum. Ethereum looks so much better. We only pulled back to the 20-day moving average. And we actually made a little bit of a high. We came right up to that level, but look at this pullback. It looks to be the best so far. Litecoin, down at its 50-day moving average. So in crypto, Ethereum to me is the only game in town. And frankly, it's making a nice little pattern here with an ascending triangle pattern. Looking like it's gaining some strength, ready to break out. So on the trading side, Ethereum to me looks like the only tradable one. The question is the timing. There's not a lot of energy right now. We've run up here, we're basing, but we're trying to push higher. Yeah, I don't hate the trade here, but the problem is there's massive overhead resistance at 4,800. So you're really going for $200 here on a 4,000. I mean, you're going for about 5%. I think you got a 3 to 5% gain. If that is what you hunt for, then that's perfectly fine. All right. In Forex, the only trade I see, again, is just Euro Aussie. And last night I talked about how it was not bouncing, it was basing, and you can see it fell down up this. But look at these candles. These candles aren't very big. It's a very, very slow movement. So I think it's a it's a it's a decent trade, but if I go to the daily chart, the question is, based on my rule, can I go short? And you can see we are right at the 50-day moving average right here, right now on a daily chart. So for me, I need more candles below a 50-day moving average to give me the green light to go ahead and sell short Euro Aussie. So that's really all I've got. Does anyone have any questions? Want to go through anything? All right, Rudy already asked a question. If and when there's a reaction after NVIDIA earnings, which currency should we focus on? Great. Let's do that scenario. So let's say NVIDIA goes higher after earnings, which, I mean, take a look at this chart. You can see it's building and building, and it looks like it's high basing here. It wants to go higher. If it goes higher, we're not seeing really strong correlations with equities, but let me throw up the SPX, and I'm going to throw in the Japanese yen. Actually, I'm going to have to do this the other way. Let me throw in our Japanese yen basket, and then let me compare it to the SPX. So what we're looking for here is, a correlation. Do we have a correlation with the S&P and the yen? Is there an inverse correlation? Now you can see over here, there's a really big inverse correlation. As the S&P went down, the yen went up. When the S&P went up, the yen came down. So you can see there's a decent inverse correlation here with yen and the S&P. So if you think that the S&P is likely to go higher, then this would be your call to say, okay, well, the S&P is going higher. The yen right now is showing some negative correlation. Let's take a look at the correlation with Swiss franc. This one isn't nearly as good as the yen was. You can see here we had a really nice correlation, negative correlation with Swiss franc and S&P, but then look at this massive bounce here. We didn't get the buying, or we didn't get any selling. We should have seen selling in the Swiss franc, but it didn't. I mean, take a look at the difference between what the yen did on that rally and what the Swiss franc did. So it's telling you that right now the correlations are a little bit better with yen. Let's see if there's any correlations with dollar. Yeah, I mean, you can see here that the correlations are pretty good with dollar here. When S&P goes down, dollar goes up. When S&P goes up, dollar comes down. I still like the yen correlation a little bit better. I just think it's a little bit stronger than those. So looking at long S&P, I think what you want to do is you want to probably look at yen short trades. Also, euro has been weak. Euro has been weak all week. It's mostly from the French politics. Sounds like they're going to have a new snap election, which is never good for political stability. That's why we've seen the euro weaken a bit. So the question is, what do you go long? I think yen short is a no-brainer. What do you go long? Let's take a look at Aussie. Aussie showing a pretty nice correlation with the S&P at the moment. And actually, I really like this even better because when the S&P pulled back, take a look at what Aussie did. Aussie did not pull back at all. And now that the S&P is rising again, we see a little bit of a rise in the Aussie as well. So the Aussie, to me, is showing some good positive correlation. Here's another, well, no, CAD's just flat. It outperformed when the market tanked, but it didn't do anything when the market rebounded. So yeah, to me, CAD doesn't look interesting at all to me. And the Kiwi's just been so weak. You can see that as the S&P rallied, when it fell, the Kiwi fell right along with it. When it rallied, the Kiwi didn't go along with it at all. So that's leading me to say, Aussie yen is going to be the trade to look at if NVIDIA beats earnings. And you can see it's a nice little pattern forming here. I'm going to hide this S&P. It's a nice little pattern forming here on the daily chart. Again, it's right at my 50-day moving average. For me, it's like I said, I need like a little bit more of candle. I need like one or two more candles to really get the green light. But for me, this one looks probably the best to go long if NVIDIA beats earnings. If they miss earnings, I actually don't like the trade as much. Going back to the correlations, the yen was showing the best correlation when the markets tanked. So when the markets tanked, the yen spiked even more than the Swiss franc. Well, no, the Swiss franc spiked quite a bit too. So yeah, if the markets go down, then it's just the opposite. It's yen long and Swiss franc long. Probably against euro would be the call here. All right, so great question, Rudy. I like that question quite a bit and gets us ready for a potential trade later on tonight. All right. I'm just reading Mike's question. Hey, Mike, why don't you send that to me in an email, and I can answer that via email, or else we can just do a quick session together. All right. I see someone raise their hand. I don't know what to do with that. I guess if you want to unmute yourself, you can do that and ask a question. If not, you can always just type your question in the message section. All right, we already talked about Ethereum. Yeah, Ethereum to me, if you're looking to trade crypto, looks to be the only game in town. It's just, I think you're hoping and praying that there's a positive correlation between the S&P with NVIDIA earnings coming out. And let's see. We're going to have to change this S&P. A lot of times, again, crypto is so volatile that when you compare it in the same percentage scale, you can see this line is virtually flat. So I'm going to go ahead and change this and go to new price scale. So I'm going to set a new price scale. That's going to make it to where it's on its own thing. So what we want to see is we want to see positive correlation with S&P and Ethereum. And you can see it's got a decent positive correlation. Really decent positive correlation here. It definitely got a little weaker in this period right here. But you can see since the bottom of the S&P moving up, we've seen a nice move up. So yeah, I think you can also look at long Ethereum off of NVIDIA beating earnings. Because again, you're playing this correlation of S&P going higher. What are the correlations out there? I think you're going to find the best correlation with Ethereum. Yeah. Again, Ethereum is the best correlation here. All right. Well, that's really all I've got for you. Not a lot to talk about. Hopefully, if you've never done this correlation thing, play around with it. It's really cool. Load up your currency symbols, and then you just come over here to this plus sign, and you add in whatever it is you want. So again, you could be like, hey, you know what? I actually want to see the correlation with gold. I'm going to add it in gold, and I can now go through and be like, okay, what currency is correlated with gold at the moment? And I can go through and be like, okay, Swiss franc, which we figured would be positively correlated with gold. It's showing some positive correlation. We usually see negative correlation, dollar against gold, and you can see it's showing some really good negative correlation at the moment. it's just a really cool little tool to help out with correlations to see, is there a correlation at the moment? How strong is it? And can I use that in my trading? All right, if there aren't any more questions, let's go ahead and wrap this up. Like I said, I thought it was going to be short and sweet, not a whole lot to talk about with it being late August. Market volatility should increase next week. So I think just be patient. If there's a nice move off of NVIDIA, I think maybe, again, that Aussie yen is probably the best looking trade out there. If there's a move off of the PCE index on Friday, for me, it's a little late. I'm also going to be out of town next week, so I'm not looking to play anything or hold over the weekend. But I think that's going to set up next week for a much better trading environment than this week. All right, hey, thanks for joining, everyone. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.